So today we're going to be going over verbs. And obviously, verbs are a very important aspect of English grammar. If we remember, a sentence needs a subject and a verb, right? So there are going to be some sentences that are actually only one word or a phrase, but usually there's something implied. So majority of sentences, 99.872% of sentences are going to have a verb. Now, if we remember the definition of a verb, word of action or being, right? So we're going to have two general types of verbs: action verbs, being verbs. Now, if we break it down further and look much closer, we see actually that there are three types of action verbs, and then one type of being verbs. Okay, generally speaking. So these are, you know, all these. Remember, we all know grammar, right? Now we're just learning it scientifically. Now we're going to first look at the action verbs, and we're going to see that basically what we have to think about is what type of action is it? Okay, and I mean by what type, I mean, is that action going to a receiver, right? Is it being received, or is there no receiver? So there are two types. Now, what we call those types of verbs that have the transfer of action to a receiver, we call them transitive verbs. And if we look at the chart, there are actually two transitive verbs. Right? And then we have another type, okay, which is those that do not transfer action to a receiver. Intransitive. The in there is a negation. Okay, so intransitive. It's like inept or etc. And then we can say that intransitive linking, same thing, does not carry action to a receiver. Now, obviously, it's a being verb, so of course it's not going to carry any action, right? The one that is a little strange is this: it's an action verb, intransitive complete, but it doesn't carry action to any receiver. So we'll look at that in a second. What we're going to first look at in detail is the transitive active verb. This is by far the easiest to understand. So if we look at the example, Rex bit Joe. Okay. Who or what did Rex bite? Joe. This is called the thing that's receiving the action. Now notice we have an arrow here that goes from Rex to Joe. There's an action, and there's a doer of the action. Who's the doer of the action? It's Rex. And what action is he doing? Biting. Who is or what is he biting? Joe. So Joe is what's called the direct object. Notice direct object, not just any object, direct object. He is receiving the action directly. It means if we were to conceive of Rex and the action that he's doing, somebody, Joe, is receiving that action. Joe is getting bit. Poor Joe. Might have to put Rex down. Now let's go to, now that's easy enough, right? It's a clear, something's receiving the action. Okay, how is this separated from these other verbs? Well, look at the transitive passive. One is active, one is passive. Okay, what does passive here mean? Let's look. Joe was bitten. Who did the biting? Grammatically, we don't know at the moment. And what do I mean by that? The subject of the verb, look at Rex, the first one, transitive active. Rex bit. Rex is the subject of that verb. Rex is doing the biting. Rex bit Joe. We know grammatically that's who did it. But then it says Joe was bitten. Grammatically, there's no doer of the verb. Grammatically, there's no subject for the verb. Instead, the subject, right? And I mean the subject of the verb in terms of the one doing the action. But there is a subject at the same time. It's Joe. But Joe here, right, he's receiving the action. So the object, what was up there as the direct object, has now become the subject. And the subject is receiving the action. So that's why it has these two lines here. subject does action. Let me clean this up a bit. So we have the subject here does the action. That's the top one, transitive active. And then here, subject receives the action. Okay, so what used to be the direct object, Joe, in the first one, Rex's bit, is now the subject of the transitive passive, right? So if you were to go from the transitive active to the transitive passive, that's what you do. You take out the subject and you replace it with the direct object. Arabic has the same thing. They actually call this subject here, Joe was bitten, they call it the na'ib al-fa'il, the representative of the doer of the verb. Now look, Joe was bitten, right? Do we know grammatically, ignore that by Rex there, but just by looking at Joe was bitten, right? Just that. If we were to just look at that, we wouldn't know, right? Joe was bitten. We wouldn't know who's doing the action, okay? The sentence is complete. It's fine. There's nothing wrong with it. Joe was bitten. That's it. But this often happens where someone puts a prepositional phrase answering the question, what? Here, was bitten. How, where, when, why. It's modifying a verb, has to answer how, where, when, why. Where? No. Why? No. When? No. How? By Rex. Okay, answer the question how. So this, okay, is not the grammatical doer of the verb, this by Rex. It's not actually a subject. Don't think that it is. There's a difference between meaning and grammar sometimes. Grammatically, by Rex, that Rex is not doing the action of the verb grammatically. Grammatically, by Rex is not doing the action of the verb. In meaning, in our understanding, he is. Okay? It's a difference. But look, if I ask you, who's doing the action of the verb? There's the only thing in a sentence that can do the action of the verb, the only thing that can be, it has to be the subject of the verb. So like on the top, Rex bit Joe. Rex is doing the biting. Now here, Joe was bitten. There's no subject doing the action of the verb. Instead, the subject is receiving the action of the verb. Okay? So remember this rule. It'll help you. If you see a prepositional phrase and you think that's the doer of the verb or the subject of the verb, just say no in your mind. It's not. Prepositional phrase negates its ability to be the doer of the verb. It may sound a little strange now, but that's the way it goes. So now look, we have two transitive verbs, transitive active, transitive passive. One, the subject, Rex, is doing the biting to Joe. The object is receiving the action. Then we have transitive passive. Joe was bitten. Joe is being bitten by Rex, right? But Joe is being bitten. Here the subject is receiving the action, so it's passive. Passive here just means something like the doer of the verb is unknown grammatically. Now let's look at intransitive. We have intransitive complete and intransitive linking. We have Rex barks at Joe. So first, start off by ignoring at Joe. Just look at this. Who or what is doing the action? Rex. What action is he doing? Barking. I can stop there. There's nothing receiving the action grammatically. It's just Rex barks. John swam. John taught. I'm not saying who. This is called intransitive complete. Intransitive because there's no action being sent to a receiver. Complete because you have a complete sentence there, right? It's done. If I say Rex bit, usually, right, we're waiting. Who or what did he bite? The sentence needs to be completed. Okay, Rex bit. I'm waiting. Who did he bite? But Rex barks. Okay, I can end right there. Now there are some verbs, right, that can move and be different types of. It could be transitive active, it could be intransitive complete. But for a good portion of these, they're either transitive active or they're intransitive complete. Now again, we have this problem with the prepositional phrase. Do not think at Joe is the subject, is the receiver. Do not think he is receiving the action of the verb barking. It's a prepositional phrase. It's an adverb. Joe there is an object, but it's an object of a preposition. It's not an object of a verb. That's the difference, okay? Those are the three action verbs. Finally, intransitive linking, the being verb. Rex is happy. Rex is a dog. For these, you have a subject, Rex. And you have a being verb, is. And then, this is what's new. You have two choices for predicates, right? You either have predicate adjective, which is happy, or predicate noun, which is dog. Either the predicate is an adjective or it's a noun. That's it. Those are the two options, okay? One thing that they've added here is a list of all the linking verbs. You should memorize it. If you have all these memorized, you'll know what all of the linking verbs are. So these are just like is. They really are saying, it's like an equal sign. They're really saying is in some way, right? So Rex appeared happy. It's like saying he is happy, okay? He looked happy. He felt happy. He sounded happy. He tasted happy. I don't know about that. He smelled happy. Maybe. He remained happy. He grew happy. He stayed happy. All of those are really saying he is happy. Or Rex is a dog. He smelled like a dog for sure. He tasted like a dog. That's kind of gross. But he sounded like a dog, definitely, right? So that's what you have to take into consideration here. Memorize these linking verbs, okay? Now, before we end, I'm going to teach you a little trick. This is called the verb test. It's a poem, actually. State the action, the doer to, and who or what it was done to. State the action, the doer to, and who or what it was done to. Now, if I break that down into a test, we have the action, doer, and then who or what it was done to. This is the test. Depending on what answers I get on this test, I'm going to be able to determine what verb I have. So you can do this yourself. Try to answer these questions, right? If I have state the action due to who or what it was done to, check out transitive active. Does the transitive active verb have an action? Bit, yes, it does have an action. Does it have a doer? Rex, yeah, it does. Okay, cool. Who or what it was done to? Joe. Okay, it has both. Look at the next one. Transitive passive. Does it have an action? Yep. Does it have a doer? Yep. Who or what it was, does not have a doer, right? Who or what it was done to? Yep, Joe, right? We don't have a doer in transitive passive. Easy. Now, what about intransitive complete? Do we have an action? Yeah, Bart's. Do we have a doer? Rex. Who or what it was done to? Nope. Right. Now, what about intransitive linking? Well, does an intransitive linking verb have action? No. Does an intransitive linking verb have a doer? No. Does intransitive linking have a who or what it was done to? No, because it doesn't have action. So you can't have a doer of an action. You can't have anything that the action is being done to unless you have action. Easy. So if you get a verb, you can do this test on it. Ask, does it have action? Yep. Does it have a doer? Yep. Does it have a who or what it was done to? Yep. So it's a transitive active, right? If it doesn't have the doer, transitive passive. If it doesn't have the who or what, intransitive complete. It doesn't have any of the three, intransitive linking. And that will help you identify any verb, no matter what. And that's all we need for verbs. Go through the book, start practicing, and start diagramming.